Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Get Lit. I'm Kate.
And I'm Pat.
We've been doing this, we just realized this morning, for a little over a year. Our year anniversary would have been the last episode that you saw before this one in late October. So we're very excited to have gotten through a year of this. Behind the camera, you cannot see him, but the wonderful Terrence Alt is our cameraman. And we've been doing this for a long time, and it gets better every year.
Thank you to Terrence.
Yeah, it gets better every month, I should say.
Yes, he has.
So we are here to do something a little different from what we've done in the past. We haven't done a book talk in a while. And so we were noticing that we tend to cover a lot of fiction, and though we both read plenty of nonfiction. And I feel that it's often fiction that gets all of the hype. You know? And so now I almost exclusively listen to both fiction and nonfiction. I use our fabulous downloadable services, Libby, Overdrive, Freeding. These are, well, Libby and Overdrive are one and the same, but it's mostly Libby now. And I'm in my car several hours a day, and so it's really a singular experience listening to books. A lot of people still have a bit of prejudice against audiobooks, saying, well, it doesn't count, you're not really reading, but being read to is a privilege, especially if you have a good narrator. And some of the things I'm going to talk about today, we only have as downloadables. So you'll notice I have like one book with me today. Of the ones I'm going to talk about, it's the only one that we actually have in hard copy. So this one that I'm going to begin with is Frans de Waal. He is a naturalist, a Dutch naturalist, called Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are? Don't be misled by the leopard on the cover. He actually doesn't talk about leopards at all in this book, but he talks about bats, whales, all sorts of birds. He talks about all sorts of primates and insects as well, wasps, and the different sorts of intelligence animals have. One point that he makes continually is the prejudice there has been in the human community, specifically in the scientific community where animal intelligence is concerned. There are scientists, PhDs, who begin their supposedly objective scientific study with the arrogant presumption that human beings are the top of the pyramid, and that's how intelligence is measured. We're at the apex of that pyramid. Everything else is presumably, assuredly, below us in intelligence. Over time, though, when there has been some objective study done, really the discovery is that animals and humans, both animals really, or all different kinds of animals, have different intelligence. We have the intelligence we need to serve us, keep us alive, keep us procreating, and thus assuring the existence of our species. There are so many interesting examples in this book, not only of different kinds of animal intelligence and how it serves them, but human intelligence and scientist intelligence and how that's evolved over time as well. Somebody makes the point of saying, you know, a dog is as smart as a 3-year-old, but that's where you make the mistake comparing animals constantly to humans. If a human being can count to 30, and a horse can't do it, because we found out the famous counting horse of years past was actually taking a signal from his trainer to start going like this, and then stopping when his trainer signaled. So now we know that, which is kind of a smart thing to be able to do anyway. But if an animal can't count to 30, well, then he's not as smart as, say, a 5-year-old. But animals have different kinds of intelligence. There is a bird called the Clark's nutcracker, for example, one example given in here, who over the course of, let's say, fall every year stores, I think, 10,000 pine nuts or thereabouts. And then over the course of winter manages to find where each one is over, I think, something like a 5 to 10 mile radius. So now, can we do that? Probably not. And this man specifically studies primates, and so there are a great many, of course, as you might think, examples of apes, bonobos, chimpanzees, orangutans, and their social structures and memory. That's another common way that humans have judged intelligence. There's all this argument about whether animals remember, how long they remember. That's gone into in great detail. Also, just the concept of, do animals have personalities? Again, the presumption at the beginning was, no, of course they can't, only humans can. Anyway, you will be, if you are picking this book up, you can pick it up, put it down anytime. I won't say you'll never put it down, but you can pick it up anywhere, and it's going to give you something interesting. And if you listen to it, it's really going to be a pleasure too. So that is the first of my choices here.
Fantastic, but then nobody can tell me that my dog does not have personality.
Exactly. I mean, if it's obvious to non-scientists.
Thank you, Kate. I just always love what you come up with. So, The Devil's Highway. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this book and with this story. It was first published in 2002. The author, Luis Alberto Urrea, and he is born of an American mother and a Mexican father in Mexico. So much of his story he's able to relate to both cultures and to the country of Mexico. Illegal immigration and border control are still a very divisive issue today, as we all know. Very little has really changed. The Devil's Highway is the true story of 23 men who paid to be smuggled into the United States, attempting to cross the border in Arizona, known as the deadliest region of North America. Thus the name, the Devil's Highway. These men did not know that they would be traversing 50 miles of desert in 115-degree heat. 14 of the 26 men who embarked on this journey made it. Unfortunately, the others did not. Urrea examined the lives and the stories of these men who paid to escape, how they were misinformed and ill-equipped to face the desert. He speaks of the coyotes, the smugglers, to understand why someone might accept money to perform this illegal trip. It's a devastating book in many ways, but also a humane one. A short book about hope and death, dreams and determination, and the complexities of the border crossing. The human physical effects of extreme temperatures and dehydration on the human body. Devil's Highway is just as important today because much of the events he wrote about still has not changed. This book was regarded at the time, and still is, one of the most read books of the time. That's 18 years ago. It was also shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize. I found the book fascinating when I read it, both in the detail. One particular part of the book that truly struck me was he talked about each of the individual men who wanted to make this journey, who decided they needed to make it, to earn a living, to get an education, to have the opportunity, to get jobs, to make money, to send back to their family, to bring their families over. That has not changed. They all thought that what they were doing, that they could do. And there's some very poignant parts about where the mother is saying goodbye to her son and reminding him to save his brown socks for when he has his job interview. Another wife who packs the tortillas so that he won't be hungry on the way. And one of the first parts of the book has a very descriptive part of 12 of the men, 14 of the men who did make it, that severe sunburn, severe dehydration, the physical condition of the men that made the journey, made it to the U.S. It's an important book for us to read. It's an important book for us to remember all the whys and the why-nots of immigration. So please join me in reading again, or if you've not read it before, The Devil's Highway. Thank you.
Now, for the next, as I mentioned, the next few books that I talk about, I don't have anything to hold up to you, but you're going to see suddenly the cover of a book. I'm going to do that for pads too, just because it's a nice visual. I happened to have the pleasure of listening to a few classic collections of essays and articles by NORA EPHRON. I think a lot of people think of her as a screenwriter, specifically someone who wrote Academy Award-winning screenplays. But gosh, from the time she was very young, she was doing journalism for magazines. When I thought that I would, I knew that she was a notable writer and hadn't had any exposure to her material, I was reading reviews, and people were complaining about this one book that I'm going to begin with, called Wallflower at the Orgy. Well, it basically, people say, well, this material is very dated. She's talking about, people who aren't celebrities now, or events that are long past. But the reason that her work is still in print is that it is such a perfect time capsule. It's a wonderful introduction to that time in America, the political climate and the social climate and things that were happening. There was so much going on in the late 60s, early 70s, and she talks about Watergate, she talks about the women's movement, she talks about sports and all kinds of things that were changing and moving at that time. And at the time she was writing it, it was happening. And it's just so interesting to read something as sort of touching and yet apparently frivolous as her little portrait of Helen Gurley Brown, who founded Cosmopolitan magazine back in the day, what she was like in person, what her issues were, what her history was as an impoverished young lady from Arkansas, moving to LA with her family with really, truly not a dime, no exaggeration, and just making something of herself. And what a huge business that went on to become. And it's interesting to see, I don't know if you're interested in Cosmopolitan magazine, but it seems that its mission hasn't changed much over the years, but the environment in which women live certainly has. And you think of Nora Ephron as humorous, primarily. A lot of people do, and she certainly is humorous. She's very biting in her wit, but she really was a very solid journalist as well, and she talks not only about Watergate and how it went down, but with all of these figures in the middle of it and peripherally, all not only people in the administration of Nixon, but also his family members and other people who were making the news then in and around Watergate. And just so interesting to get her view as someone who was right in the middle of that time and what was going down. She talks about Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs and their supposed feud before they met on the tennis court and what came of that. I'm not going to say because you should read it. You should look it up if you don't know about it. And other things, more personal things. She talks about, what a fuss there was about what a woman's figure ought to look like, and her thought of how tough it was growing up and not having that figure, especially about the waist that women were supposed to have, and how she had three different sorts of garments that gave her three different sizes, and how her parents politely never said anything, but how she seemed to be three different people depending on which one she put on that day. So there's some pretty funny stuff in there, but it's all very smart too. There's also an essay on Dorothy Parker and the supposed thing that went down between her mother and Dorothy Parker. And it's all really interesting stuff. And it is a time capsule, so that is why you read it. Go on and read her other stuff too. Read more contemporary things that she wrote. I Feel Bad About My Neck is a wonderful one that she wrote toward the end of her life. But yeah, I would say Wallflower at the Orgy, then Crazy Salad / Scribble Scribble. That's a collection of 2 books of hers, of essays that are never going to be boring, and the reader that we have in particular reading it on her recordings is just particularly good. You'll like spending time with her.
Thank you. And you made a comment, the reader of the book. Mm-hmm. That's one of the wonderful things of audiobook. If you have the right reader for that particular story, it makes all the difference in the world. It's been my personal observation that sometimes I've listened to an audiobook and the voice doesn't really match the preconception I have of the character I'm reading about.
Right.
But when you can get the voice and the character to mesh, then you have got a wonderful experience.
Absolutely. It's a dramatic work as well as a literary one when it goes the way you want it to.
Yeah. So, speaking of those of the pulp culture, this one is kind of hard to see. This is Anthony Bourdain. Now, who among us have not had some kind of experience listening, watching, reading Anthony Bourdain, maybe talked about him with a friend, maybe cooked with him or for him or gone on his journeys, but talk about somebody who is true of the pulp culture. So I have a few of the books that we're just going to look at quickly, but first let's start out with the lightness. And this one is Anthony Bourdain, Appetites, a cookbook. And I love the description, and so consequently I'm going to use it. On television, celebrity chef and parts unknown host Bourdain, Kitchen Confidential, is a globe-trotting bad boy with a taste for offal and talent for swearing. In his first cookbook in more than a decade, he is also surprisingly sentimental, sharing the dishes he feeds his family and friends, mostly basics such as Caesar salad and grilled cheese sandwiches. With occasional more challenging entrees, he speaks candidly about fatherhood and expresses strong opinions on everything from bacon to the third slice of bread in a club sandwich. Bourdain characteristics, bite and sarcasm are here, tempered with new attentiveness. To lessen the anxiety, we've got this coming up, to lessen the anxiety around entertaining, he provides an extensive guide to Thanksgiving dinner and a wealth of useful, often humorous tips. This cookbook highlights an intriguing new chapter in Bourdain's storied career. So absolutely what it says. He has recipes that he has done over the years. He even has tomato soup splattered on the beginning of the first page. But I also love it because of the pictures in here. This one entitled Breakfast. He talks often about his family. He has pictures of his family and his friends, but he does not have pictures of his daughter, and he said, because I am a celebrity by what I chose. And I often get stopped on the street for autographs, photographs, or whatever. My daughter is a child, and she shall remain so until she decides when she's of age. And I just thought, what a beautifully loving, protective father, who didn't become a father until he was 50, but he said I had no business becoming a father before then. So really very dear. So I'm sorry about that. But I just love the photographs on the pages. So I just picked out a few. This chapter, I think, is our Bourdain. It's called Party. Lots of wonderful recipes and tips and what have you on different types of party recipes, dinners, etc. Then he mentioned Thanksgiving. Kind of a dark page, hard to see, but this begins the Thanksgiving. And he gives you a full breakdown of what to do on day 1, day 2, and day 3 for prep. And then the beginning of the cooking. He also supplies the recipes for what he's doing, the cranberry relish, the stuffing, the superb mashed potatoes with Yukon Gold potatoes. But all of the recipes, very doable. You and I can do these, and we can find all the ingredients in the store. It's fun, and especially this year when we're all getting back into the big holiday planning, this is absolutely delightful. But he has, and I had to show this page, he has what he says is business turkey, which is the one you cook and you slice and you arrange on the plate. He also has what you call the stunt turkey. This being the golden brown, crisp, lovely, moist-looking turkey that everybody goes, oh, look at that. So much fun. It's a wonderful book to be able to look at, to browse through for recipes, for comments, for the photography. It's everything you would expect from an Anthony Bourdain cookbook. And then on to one that's perhaps a little bit more sad, if you will. This is called Anthony Bourdain Remembered. When Anthony Bourdain died in June of 2018, they had, comments on the television, in the news. Everybody was just stunned and sad. But the people at CNN were very, very surprised at all of the emails and the condolences that came in from every corner of the world and from everybody from you and I, to presidents, to world leaders, to fellow chefs, remembering and writing about what Anthony Bourdain was to them, both as a man, as a chef, as a world traveler, as someone who did so much to bring society together over food. Bourdain once said, "If I'm an advocate of anything, it is to move, walk in someone else's shoes, or at least eat their food." So, absolutely a wonderful man, a joyous man to watch and to learn from. I see him kind of a guru of the 70s and 80s and 90s. I just, and if anything, I also kind of felt like, what a great social studies teacher.
Absolutely.
So, again, the book is a series of beautiful pictures with a comment written by, in this case, John Waxman, chef and author. Tony Bourdain was the revolutionary of the food universe. He literally changed the landscape. Another one that I was quite taken with. First a picture, and this is written by Cole S. In 2008, I was a young cadet at the U.S. Air Force Academy. I was rarely allowed to leave the academy grounds. Anthony's shows became a way for me to travel the world without leaving my dorm room. Later, as an Air Force officer, I was stationed in remote places and had few opportunities to get out of my tiny, isolated world. Anthony's shows continually became my escape. Because of this man, no matter how small or isolated my world could get, I always felt I could escape with the trend to some remote culture and breathe in for at least an hour or two. Again, his quote, "My idea of heaven is sipping a bowl of pho with Tony in some Vietnamese hole-in-the-wall restaurant." And this is not by President Obama, but he and they shot the show in Vietnam in a small hole-in-the-wall Vietnamese restaurant over a cup of tea. And it was fascinating. But a down-to-earth man, but he pulled no bones, he said what he wanted to say. He knew the cultures, he knew the people, and he knew if we can meet on a level like that every day, it could be better.
Absolutely, he really was our eyes on the world for a lot of us who can't travel to all the places he went, and it was a huge loss when he went.
Yeah.
But I was going to add, were you going to?
No, I was just going to mention that we have many of his books here at the library, but I just thought it would be fun. So if you go online, you will see many of his books here at the library, as well as the DVDs. You will see downloadable books. If there's a book that we don't have, do always remember that we have our interlibrary loan, that we can get these books for you. But this one, The Last Interview, was very, very good. More detailed, of course, than Anthony remembered, but very, very good. His series, Anthony Bourdain, No Reservations, so much fun to watch and good for the whole family. Did you know he wrote fiction? Anthony Bourdain, the Bobby Gold stories, and This one I haven't read, I will be honest with you, but it is checked out in my name. So when I'm done, I'll put it back on the shelf and it's your turn. It's a thriller. It's a thriller. And then Kate, when I mentioned that we might look at this book as well, Anthony Bourdain will travel. She said, well, I've listened to that. So tell us your take on this particular.
Oh yeah, well I would say actually, you know, it's one of the ones that it was published posthumously, so you don't have the pleasure of hearing Anthony's voice. It's people being him, right? But it's a lot of notes that were going to be made into a book that he put together over time, or perhaps into further TV shows. And so what they did was compile what was left, and now you have actors and associates who were close to him reading them to you. And also there's a lady who was one of his associates giving you some actual travel tips, like where you want to stay, who you want to contact, that kind of thing. I was also going to say, yeah, if you can at all, for goodness sake, listen to Kitchen Confidential, and then the one that was the follow-up that I can't remember the title of it right now, but it's his voice telling his own story. He did write a couple memoirs and record them. And there's, you know, if you can have his voice telling his story, that's what you want.
He has a very distinctive voice. And
Yeah.
So anyway, but when Kate and I decided that we would do the nonfiction, I thought about this book and that book and whatever, and all of a sudden I thought, Anthony Bourdain, he's a man of our times, and he's a man that taught us so much and entertained us so much and brought the world to us in a way that far surpasses some of our Travel Channel programs, which is all the glitz and the glamour and the little hideaway spots, but they're really not. But when you see an Anthony Bourdain, he's been there, done that, and he's shared it with you.
Great. Also, by the way, I can recommend two more really neat audio nonfiction chef memoirs, two very different ones. I recently listened to Kwame Onwuachi, Notes from a Young Black Chef. I can only call it a partial memoir because he's still so young. But he wrote what's been going on in his career up to now, including very bravely, I thought, the beginning and then failure of a very ambitious restaurant. But his path to there was fascinating, and he's still moving and shaking. He's just at the beginning still of the arc of his career. And what a smart young fellow. And now he's working for Food and Wine magazine. He's one of the editors. It'll be interesting to watch as his career goes on. Also, David Chang, if you know the food world, you sure know that name. He founded Momofuku Restaurant and many others after that, also known as a bad boy, friend of Anthony. He talks about him too, as well as David Chang's a very interesting figure also in that world, about his anger issues and what he's done over the years about them. And it's also read, each one read by the chef, by the guy himself telling his own story. It's really worth your while. And David Chang's is called Eat a Peach. And now I was just gonna, you know what, I'm just gonna briefly mention a couple other things. I think just this summer, I had the pleasure of listening to, I had been coming from LA where we go to visit my parents every summer for the 4th of July, and I thought I'd listen to The Castle on Sunset, Life, Death, Love, Art, and Scandal at Hollywood's Chateau Marmont. Now, you've probably heard of the Chateau Marmont if you follow showbiz at all. It was founded in 1929 and developed a rep over the years as being a place where people inside the business wanted to stay. It isn't, you're not going to go to the Ritz-Carlton or anything. There are all these much fancier hotels, but the Chateau Marmont was cool, and it was private, and people would live there for weeks on end. Anyone from Natalie Wood, Tony Perkins, Tab Hunter, Jean Harlow lived there for a long time. Lindsay Lohan got kicked out after racking up $50,000 in charges over only 2 months. And of course, famously, John Belushi passed away there. And the tone of the book, from its beginning to all the way through its existence, is covered with just the right tone. It's not reverent, because that wouldn't work, but it isn't sleazy. It isn't too much dishing the dirt. It's right exactly how you want it to be. You get all the juicy details without feeling like you need to go take a shower afterwards. So again, that's by Sean Levy, The Castle on Sunset. I highly recommend that. And I was just going to briefly just go to my last one before handing it back over to you, Kat. I'm not going to talk very long about it. Another interesting one, also on audio, narrated by the author, Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel, P-E-R-E-L, an Israeli therapist, a PhD. And it's just, again, I can't overemphasize how important it is to listen to some works. Now, you have to get used to her accent. It's very thick, but her personality comes through so much. It's about making cohabitation with someone for whom you have a life commitment interesting after years and years of being together. Some of us can relate to, and what it is that causes problems there in the first place. And it's just very interesting. The idea that she considers to be a very, she calls it puritanical, but no, actually it's in the Ten Commandments, really, about not committing adultery. Just the idea of being true to one person. Is it truly inherently in the nature of men and women? How can we remain true to one another and still remain interested in one another? She talks about how our values as a society don't really jibe with what makes us interesting to each other behind closed doors, and how to have both things in your life. And it's just very smart and interesting. And that is one that you will keep compulsively listening to. And I am done for now.
Kate, you do a wonderful job, and then there's this. But The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Many of us have read his books over the years, The Tipping Point, Blink, so on and so forth, many great books. This one is Outliers, the story of success. But what makes it different is I am very proud of our nonfiction section. And we have tons of books, how to be successful, how to earn money, how to become the top of your class, how to become the best CEO, whatever. Well, Gladwell kind of approaches it from another way, in that, well, here's his favorite quote. Who we are cannot be separated from where we're from. And again, in this stunning book, Gladwell takes us on an intellectual journey through the world of outliers, the best and the brightest, the most famous and the most successful. He asks the question, what makes achievers different? His answer is that we pay too much attention to what successful people are like and too little to where they are from. That is their culture, their family, their generation, the idiosyncratic experiences of their upbringing. And along the way, he explained the secret of software billionaires, what it takes to be a great soccer player, why Asians are good at math, and what made the Beatles the greatest rock band. In other words, for example, a lot of early success in school is to be born at least 6 to 8 months before you qualify for, to get into first grade or what have you. So if the cutoff point is August, best if perhaps you could be born in January, February, or March. You will have that level of maturity, you will have that level of size, which lead to two things. Sometimes size is associated, especially height, with leadership. For boys especially, but girls too, they tend to be bigger and be able to be a little bit quicker with the sports. The others will be too, but they'll just have to catch up. He talks about the 10,000 rule, and that is to master anything. And this is what made the Beatles great, and this is what Bill Gates has in common with the Beatles. If you practice something 10,000 times, you will be successful, you will have mastered. He talks about why Asians seem to be quicker and better at math than we. He said it's tied into their language. that help me out on this one, Kate, that in their language, the numbers are also said, and that when they learn their number, they also learn to add their numbers at the same time, so that it's not two different skills. I hope I had that right, but consequently, he has given lots of examples of where we are, where we come from, can play a lot into who we become. And you said that you have read this book as well, and you were quite taken with it.
Yeah, just the idea that, look, if you give something 10,000 hours, that's all you need, you will be an expert at whatever that thing was, right? Because Bill Gates, he was constantly on this one computer,
Yes.
just doing nothing but that. The Beatles rehearsed. They were playing, what, 4 shows a week for
Yeah.
4 hours at
Yeah.
a time in
Yeah.
Hamburg. And just, it was just fascinating.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and I just couldn't shut up about it after I read it. I was just regaling my husband
Yeah.
with examples.
Yes, and it's not that you're going to say, well, if it's all that, and I was born in August and I'm starting school in September, I have no chances. Of course you do. But it just gives a whole nother perspective on who we are, where we're from. So much contribute to what we become. So it's an interesting book to read. It's a fun book to read. You'll be able to relate to it somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so while you're reading all of the other how to get rich quick books, drop this one in too on your library pile.
Absolument.
And so, that's a little bit of an overview of what we find in our nonfiction. I think, as I just said, we have an incredible nonfiction selection in all of our Scottsdale Public Library. Many people will come in not knowing what to read, and they'll go browse the biographies.
Mm-hmm.
And always come away with something that's either hugely historic and fact-based, or something that is historic and fact-based, but it's got kind of a good story to go behind it. If you're interested in true crime, we got a lot of those, and they are fun to read, and they read like a novel. If you're interested in cooking, if you're interested in a huge amount of subject areas. Anything that Mr. Dewey included in the system, we have it.
Absolutely, and anyone that you walk up to at our information desk anywhere in the library is going to have a different little take on what might be interesting to you.
Yeah.
So do hit us up. Even if we can't immediately come up with 10 things that you'll love, give us about 5 minutes.
Yes.
Or do an Ask a Librarian query off of our website, because or Bookmates, which is a new feature. Do a Bookmates request, and we will give you a bunch of stuff you're going to love.
Scottsdale starts with you.
And remember, a healthy Scottsdale starts with you.
By keeping
See you next time.
down between you and others. Well.